A writing from Contact Report 373.
Edward Albert Meyer Niederflax, 1253 Bülow/CH, Switzerland.
To all those in authority in the world, responsible for the welfare of the earth and its entire humanity are, in addition to the individual human beings of all peoples, in the front line the authorities and their superior governments, and to all those in authority and government, as well as to every individual human being, I will speak the following words of admonition. My fatherly friend Sfath instructed me prophetically and predictively in many a thing that will come to the earth in the future and bring unpleasantness. These things, some of which can be changed, but some of which will inevitably come to pass, I will interpret as follows. It is only 6 years since the Second World War came to an inglorious end, which lasted from 1939 to 1945, and cost the lives of some 62 million human beings. Even atomic energy was used to murder hundreds of thousands of human beings and destroy their cities. Through the irresponsible and criminal action of the USA, when the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki were destroyed by atomic bombs. All this, however, will unfortunately not be the end of all horrors, mass murders, wars and acts of terror, unless the human beings of all nations finally become clever enough to remove their power-hungry government bosses from office and let them seize the hare's paw, seize control. It is the people in every country who elect the rulers. As a rule, unfortunately, the wrong ones who first make big promises and then, when they are in power, unleash war and terror and cast a spell over the people with lies and deceit, making them subservient to their superiors and oblivious to the real truth. This, however, will have evil consequences in the future for worldwide state powers if the people do not intervene, will involve the human beings more and more in wars, terror, and hatred, until the whole thing assumes uncontrollable forms worldwide. The time for this is not far off, for these monstrous things are already glimmering in a smouldering fire that will become an open fire within the next few years. There is still time to stop the monstrosity that is prophesied for the future of all earthly humanity and for the earth and its nature. Effective countermeasures can still change everything for the better if the peoples and all those responsible in the governments, the authorities, the sciences and the military, as well as all those otherwise responsible, make every effort to stop all evils and to bring about a positive change. If this does not happen, then unimagined horrors are in store, with the world power USA leading the sword of death and destruction and annihilation in every respect, while Israel and all those states that will nestle in hypocritical friendship with the USA will also follow in its wake, against the will of the sensible part of the respective people. Not only wars, terror, destruction and annihilation with thousands of deaths and hundreds of thousands of murdered ones will mark the future, but also an enormous overpopulation, through whose fault all laws of nature will come apart at the seams. All storms will increase through the fault of human beings and take on ever more violent forms, such as hailstorms, snowstorms and rain floods, but also the ozone layer will be very dangerously damaged. The longer the floods continue, the more they will become the order of the day, because overpopulation will turn the floodplain forests and plains into residential areas, so that the wild waters of the rain floods will find their way into the houses of human beings, because they can no longer escape into uninhabited floodplain areas. Landslides and avalanches, as well as earthquakes and seaquakes, and storms of all kinds, windstorms and typhoons, hurricanes and tornadoes, will increase in number and become ever more violent and destructive. And overpopulation will also be to blame for this, because overpopulation will cause tremendous negative effects and thus unnatural climate change, which will already begin to have a very detrimental effect on the world in just 1 decade from today. The immense masses and weights of the cities and villages are constantly harassing the inner structures of the earth more and more, which affects the tectonics, which inevitably leads to increased tectonic shifts and faults, which will cause immense quakes worldwide, whereby the dead will ultimately number in the hundreds of thousands and millions. And these quakes will also have an influence on the entire earthly volcanism. Consequently, also, the volcanoes, which are interconnected in a multifold wise worldwide, will become more and more frequent and more destructive. This, too, will claim many human lives, especially in those areas where dwellings are unreasonably built too close to the volcanoes, as is also the case on the beaches of seas, on great rivers and lakes, where buildings are erected directly on the shores, which will be flooded by storm waves and tidal waves on an enormous scale, and will claim very many human lives. But that is not all, for the ever-increasing overpopulation, which is predicted to grow to over 6 billion within 50 years, will cause many enormous and insoluble problems. Famines will increase, while old diseases thought to have been eradicated will return. Mass tourism from the industrialized countries will flood them with economic refugees from all over the world, just as an enormous asylum seeker problem will also become an insoluble problem. And it is predicted that at the end of the 1980s, the economic boom will collapse and a tremendous and unprecedented unemployment will break out worldwide, which will increase crime by the unemployed as well as by criminal gangs from the so-called third world countries, which will spread into the industrialized countries and will not even shy away from murder when they pursue their misdeeds. National debts are also increasing immeasurably, as is terrorist extremism and neo-Nazism, etc. Prostitution, as predicted by Svarth, is taking on unbelievable forms and is being brought out into the global public sphere in such a wise that even children are not spared. In the next few decades, prostitution will become a respectable profession, officially recognized by the authorities and also subject to taxation. Television, which has already been invented, will become part of everyday life in every family, as will the technology of computers, which is already being diligently worked on in America, Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Television and computers will become the most important information media, but also the most important forms of public prostitution advertising. In the course of the next 50 years, Human beings will become cold in their thoughts and feelings, as a result of which interpersonal relationships will bear ever stranger blossoms and will only be goal-determined. True love will become a rarity, and many marriages will take place only to indulge in a certain status traded in prestige and money. The result will be that many marriages will no longer last, families will be destroyed, and the offspring will be both sexually abused and also become antisocial and neglected. People, especially the young, will begin to lead a life that is often only oriented towards drugs as early as the end of the 1950s, and later, when the time of the 1980s approaches, the drug problem will become rampant, just as only pleasure will be important and destructive, and disharmonious sounds will characterize the world of music, affecting the psyche and causing the entire behavior of those human beings to fall into the negative, who orient themselves towards this destructive type of music. In the field of sectarianism, more and more ones supposedly chosen by God are appearing, who exploit their believers financially, make them subservient, and even drive them to suicide. The irresponsible will use the time to become rich through their believing followers, especially when they spread fear and terror with regard to the millennium change, because, as they will claim, the world is supposed to end in the year 2000. They are not afraid to spread lies that extraterrestrials will save the chosen ones, but of course only if they deliver large sums of money to the cult leaders. There is much more to come from the growing overpopulation, which is basically the real source of all evil things in the future. For the greater the overpopulation becomes, the more enormous the resulting problems will be. Thus, new rampant spreading diseases will appear already in the coming 80s, which will claim millions of human lives. Rampant spreading diseases that are transmitted from animals to human beings, just as, in a more distant future, rampant spreading diseases will be introduced to the Earth from outer space. All this, however, that the rampantly spreading diseases come from animals and spread to human beings, will be denied by those responsible and slandered as liars by those who know the real truth. If the world and its humanity are thus ruined, then the human being of the earth is the author of it himself or herself, whereby they create the real cause by driving their overpopulation into ever higher numbers. So it will not be an imaginary god of some religion or sect who will determine the coming monstrous problems and excesses, but solely the human beings of the earth, who in their delusion believe themselves to be the highest and most powerful being in the universe, far higher than creation can ever be. Through humans' guilt, through their overpopulation, through their megalomania, through their unreasonableness and self-importance, they challenge all the powers of nature, which rebel together with the earth and defend themselves against the machinations of earth humans, which have gotten very badly out of control of the good human nature. So, the powers of nature overflow on the earth, together with the earth itself, because the human being disturbs and destroys the entire natural course of the elements and of life. All this I have to say, for it is the prophetic and at the same time predictive truth. Take courage, all of you who hear these words from me, to consider what I have said, and to draw the correct conclusions from it, and to act correctly, for there is still time to do so. but it's already beginning to slip between your fingers. Consider this prophecy and prediction and act in the sense of a change for the better. Also make everything public for all human beings of the earth, through teachings in all media, in order to achieve a change and transformation in a positive sense, and in order to protect the earth and its entire humanity from all evil, from all manner of getting very badly out of control, the many deaths and destructions, and from the step into annihilation. All of you who receive my letter have the opportunity, the might, and the responsibility to save the earth and its humanity from all that I have revealed to you. Do not procrastinate, but act, and act quickly, for time is short. If you do not act immediately, then you will be just as responsible for it when the prophecy comes true, as well as all those who will see to its fulfillment in the future.
Edward Albert Meyer.